Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us for another story time today. It is summer. It's been fairly hot out. Some of you have probably been spending time maybe at the beach or a river or a lake somewhere near the water. And a lot of us, when we go to those areas, like to look for very cool rocks, right? Maybe you bring those rocks home with you. Maybe you find really flat rocks that you're going to try to skip across the water. Maybe some of those rocks are really rough or have sparkles on them. Maybe some of them have crystals inside and you just can't resist picking up that rock and putting it in your pocket. Maybe some of them remind you of something. It's my dinosaur egg rock. I like to think that it's a dino egg. Maybe some of them have cool patterns on them, like stripes. Maybe some of them are just super smooth, and it's kind of a rubbing stone, and you just like to rub your fingers on it. Or maybe some of them are just shaped really weird, like a little sorting hat from Harry Potter. Right? Rocks are super cool. They come in all different colors and shapes and textures and sizes, and for a lot of us, we really like to look for rocks while we're out on our walks or at the beach or wherever we might be. But rocks are even cooler for another reason. Many of our rocks are millions, if not billions, of years old, and rocks have stories to tell. We are going to read a story about a rock today, but even here in Minnesota and Wisconsin, we are really lucky. We have a lot of super cool rocks here, and our rocks can tell a lot of really fun stories. Maybe that story is about how that big giant boulder of a rock got sucked up into a glacier as it moved across our continent, and then that glacier dropped it somewhere in Minnesota or Wisconsin 11,000 years ago. Maybe that story is from a rock that comes from the northeastern part of Minnesota or the northern part of Wisconsin around Lake Superior. And that rock might tell you a story about how it's one of the oldest rocks in North America. They can be about 3.6 billion years old up in that region. Maybe that rock is from the Driftless region, and it's going to tell you a story about how a long time ago that rock was actually under a tropical sea. And it might even show you some of the fossils that have been left behind in that rock to prove its story. So our rocks tell us all sorts of really cool stories about the history of the earth. Scientists look at those rocks to figure out how different parts of the earth formed and when they formed, what types of plants and animals used to be there right in our fossil record, and what might be there now. And we can learn just a lot about the earth and history from studying rocks. So they have stories to tell. Today we're going to read a story about one of those rocks and see what story that rock has to tell. So let's get started. So our story today is called Old Rock is Not Boring, and it was written and illustrated by Deb Pilutti. So let's get started. Old Rock had been sitting in the same spot, at the edge of a clearing in the middle of a pine forest, for as long as anyone could remember. And even before that. Being a rock seems awfully boring, said Tall Pine. You sit in the same spot day after day, said Spotted Beetle. It's a very nice spot, said Old Rock. Don't you want to go anywhere? Asked Hummingbird. What do you think? Would it be boring to be a rock and sit in the same spot day after day? Do you think rock ever moves? I've flown all over the world and sipped the nectar of exotic flowers. I would surely be bored if I could not fly. Who else is here? I flew once, said Old Rock. Gosh, said Tall Pine. How? Asked Spotted Beetle. Rocks don't fly, said Hummingbird. Old Rock told them about the time in the beginning when darkness was all around. Any guesses? Where's Old Rock? Why is it so dark? And then I erupted out of a volcano and soared through a fiery sky into the bright light of a new world. So it was just one time, said Hummingbird. And now you're sitting here, said Tall Pine. Being bored, said Spotted Beetle. I'm not bored, said Old Rock. Don't you want to see more? Asked Spotted Beetle. If I climb to the tip-top branch of Tall Pine, I might see a deer mouse nibbling seeds in a nearby tree, or watch ships sailing across the big lake. Old Rock said, I've seen a lot. Old Rock told them about the time a group of friendly dinosaurs lumbered by, munching every leaf in sight. Then, many years later, a not-so-friendly dinosaur came looking for a meal. So here's T-Rex, and he's asking if Old Rock has seen this dinosaur. And Old Rock says, no, I haven't seen her. She's hiding right there. Thanks. You can notice something else on this page. There's a big comet up here. Does anybody know what comets have to do with dinosaurs? A lot of people believe a huge comet hit the Earth, and that made the Earth really cold. It changed the climate of Earth, and the dinosaurs could no longer survive. Time passed, things changed, and the world chilled. Looks like some of our dinosaur friends didn't quite make it. Poor Rock. Which isn't too bad, because Old Rock took a ride in a glacier and toured the land. So a long time ago, when these huge sheets of ice came, they could actually pick up rocks and they would be frozen in the ice, just like Old Rock is. And then, what do you think happened when they melted? Who else is in there? Once the glacier melted, it left me perched on top of a ridge, and I could see the place where the sky touches the earth. So when the glaciers melted, they dropped out all these big rocks they were carrying. Today we might see them if you see a really huge rock when you're out hiking around. It looks like someone just dropped it there. We call those glacial erratics, because the glaciers did just drop them there when they melted and retreated. My, you have seen a lot, said Spotted Beetle. How unusual, said Hummingbird. Yes, but that was ages ago, said Tall Pine. Aren't you bored now? Don't you want to move? My limbs flutter gently in a breeze and dance wildly when the wind blows. I've never danced, but I'm pretty good at doing somersaults, said Old Rock. How do you think Old Rock did somersaults? Old Rock revealed that after teetering on the ridge for a while, the ground rumbled. Ooh, what might make the ground rumble? And I tumbled and stumbled down, down, down into a valley. Grasses grew, mastodons roamed, and lakes formed. Looks like a mastodon sat on Old Rock. It says, shouldn't you be roaming? I never knew a rock had moves like that, said Tall Pine. I wish I could have seen those things, said Spotted Beetle. What happened next? Asked Hummingbird. So they started off thinking Old Rock was pretty boring, but it sounds like now they're pretty excited to find out what happened. A pine forest sprouted up around me. One day, a strong breeze shook a pine cone loose. From the pine cone, a seed fell onto the forest floor. I watched that seedling grow to be the tall pine who dances in the wind and keeps me company. Sometimes a spotted beetle wanders along to report all that he sees. And every so often, the loveliest hummingbird stops to rest after a long flight, and she describes the amazing places she's visited. Sounds pretty nice. It's a very nice spot, said Old Rock. Yes, it is, agreed Tall Pine. Very nice, said Spotted Beetle. Not boring at all, said Hummingbird. Then it shares with us a little timeline of Old Rock in the story and the real history of the Earth. So it says 1.8 billion years ago. Old rocks formed deep under the Earth's crust. Metamorphic rocks are created with extreme heat and pressure. It can take millions of years for a metamorphic rock to form. 300 million years ago, a volcano erupts and old rock is blasted into the sky. During a pyroclastic eruption, gases, ash, rocks, and lava blobs can be ejected. So pyroclastic eruptions are really explosive and things shoot out everywhere. Sometimes our volcanoes just kind of gently ooze lava, and that wouldn't be pyroclastic. 150 million years ago, old rock chats with a friendly dinosaur. Gigantic sauropods, like Brachiosaur, appeared during the Jurassic period. 66 million years ago, old rock meets a hungry T-Rex. Tyrannosaurus rex lived during the Cretaceous period, which ended 65.5 million years ago. So long ago. 2.6 million years ago, old rock begins a journey in a glacier. Glaciers covered much of the Earth's surface during the Pleistocene epoch. 16,000 years ago, the glacier retreats and leaves old rock perched on a ledge. There have been several cooling periods in Earth's history. So the most recent cooling period we had, the most recent time we had glaciers around here, glaciers covered a lot of Minnesota, almost all of Wisconsin, except the area that we are in, called the driftless region. And that driftless refers to there were no glaciers here, or no glacial drifts here. So we call it the driftless region, and that's why our geography around here is so different than everywhere else in Minnesota and Wisconsin. We have lots of hills and ups and downs because the glaciers didn't carve us flat like it did the other regions. Instead, the glaciers went around us, which is pretty cool. 11,000 years ago, a mastodon stops to rest. Mastodons roamed North America for almost 24 million years. They were around a super long time, until their extinction 10,000 years ago. Then we have present day, old rock, tall pine, spotted beetle, and hummingbird sit in a very nice spot at the edge of the clearing in the middle of the forest. They are not bored. So that's our story about old rock. The Earth is doing a really cool job for us, recycling different kinds of rocks. We saw that a rock could shoot out of a volcano, so it can cool from magma to become a rock, and we call those igneous rocks. It mentioned in here metamorphic rocks, so sometimes those rocks get pushed deep under the Earth's crust. They don't go all the way down and turn back to magma, but the heat and pressure might turn them into a different kind of rock, and that's called metamorphic rock. If they do go down far enough to become magma again, then they might come out again as an igneous rock. And then sometimes any type of our rocks can weather down and become smaller and smaller pieces of rock. So think of like sand being really tiny pieces of rock. And then when those pile up and get smooshed together over time, they can form a new type of rock called sedimentary rock. And those three types of rocks are constantly being recycled and changed into other kinds of rocks, even though the process happens super duper duper slow. So we might not notice it going on, but it's happening all the time. So thanks for tuning in to our story time about rocks today. We hope to see you at Storytime next week for another story. Bye-bye.